Hello, how are you today? Do you want to dive into a book that might just surprise you, whether it becomes your next favorite or one you might skip? Let's find out what readers are saying about it.
Casey, who has 25 likes, says, For Emily and Wendell's banter and bickering will always have a special place in my heart. The two things I didn't like about this book were the side characters, in my opinion, just didn't get enough of an ending or a conclusion. And I am definitely more of a high-stakes fantasy girl, and I've never been much of a cozy fantasy girl. But with that being said, I really did enjoy this series, and I'll be thinking about Wendell's letters to Emily for a while. Megan X1F98B hiatus on off, who has 29 likes, says, And what sort of queen would that make me? Mine. I simply cannot believe this series is over. It has secured its place into one of my favorite series of all time. Heartwarming, wholesome, nostalgic. I cannot get enough of this series. Thinking I will never again read something like this saddens me in a way I find impossible to put into words. I love the characters so much. Wendell respects towards Emily knows no bounds. I was so happy to read about Lelia, Margaret, Rose, Ariadne Poe, Neve, Callum Tarrant were such wonderful additions. Shadow Orga, Wendell's gift to Em. I was sobbing. This has got to be the best gift ever. You were my first thought. As well as my last. Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies 5, Emily Wilde's Map of Otherlands 5, Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales 5. Rosh catching up slowly, who has 236 likes, says, In a nutshell, the third book of the Emily Wilde series. Not a standalone. Great characters. Slowish pacing. Too convenient and flat in the plotting. Not as dark as could have been. Recommended in publication order only to those who are keen on completing the series. Not my favorite of the series by far. Note this review might contain minor spoilers from the earlier two Emily Wilde books. Plot preview 1910. Emily still can't accept that she might soon be the Queen of Faerie. An accomplished mortal scholar on fairies. She is now working on her biggest research topic, studying the fairy realm with her feterned fiancé, Wendell, who is making plans to recapture his rightful position as the King of Faerie. However, the duo soon learn that Wendell's stepmother, the earlier queen, has placed a curse upon the kingdom. Wendell can use his magic to save his home. But that alone won't be enough, as the consequences are deadly. It is up to Emily to find the perfect story so that she can write a happy ending for her beloved. Just as in the earlier books, the story comes to us through Emily's journal entries written in first person. This book is not to be read as a standalone work. It starts right at the deep end, continuing immediately after the events of the second book. As such, it ended up as a big test of my memory, which sadly didn't come to my assistance. I regret the long gap I had between books 2 and 3 because I didn't remember the nitty-gritties of the earlier plot. Bookish Ye's Emily as a character, a rare fictional 31-year-old who acts her age. Though she is as focused on her scholarly pursuits as ever, she is more open about showing her emotions. I love her character growth over the series. Wendell, the incorrigible Fae King who has so many flaws and is still so appealing. This book shows both his practical and his wild sides. Most of the remaining characters, comprising a motley mix of human and courtly Fae and common Fae. The variety is extensive this time. Loved the reappearance of some beloved characters from the earlier two books. A special yay to Shadow and Orga for being as awesome as always. The personal journal approach to storytelling. Emily's diary actually feels like a journal and not a novel. While her attention to detail can get tedious as well as a tad spoilerish at times, I still appreciate it as the writing is authentic to the source of information. The relationship between Emily and Wendell, which began as a one-sided attraction, turned into romance. and has now blossomed into love. I like how the relationship is based on their connection as well as their mutual need for and respect for each other. Wendell isn't shown as the ideal suitor just because he is phi. Emily isn't depicted just as the grump to Wendell's sunshine. No needless recaps of the plotline of the earlier books. The author clearly remembers that this is part of a series, and she expects readers to enter into this story knowing what happened earlier. Though my memory failed me on this, I still respect this writing choice of maintaining proper continuity. Bookish mixed bags. The plot is firmly Emily's this time around, though Wendell does have a strong role and there are several supporting characters. The story relies mainly on Emily to proceed. This feels a bit too limiting. Especially for one reason: almost every decision taken by Emily is based on the titular lost tales. So much so that she is like a horse wearing blinders about only stories being able to help them out of the problems. I did like the cleverness of the lost tale itself, but I didn't understand this narrow-minded over-reliance on the tale. It restricted the plot. Yet again, there are plenty of footnotes in Emily's journal. Some of these, especially the lore, are interesting, but after a while, they just feel superfluous. Just as in the second book, I skipped reading the footnotes after a point and had no trouble understanding the main plot. On an aside, I found it amusing to see Emily herself complaining about footnotes in her research books. The pace is quite slow for most of the way, though the tempo jumps up during the few action sequences. The second half has much better pacing. While this is the most serious of the three books, it is also the lightest in terms of plot. The action scenes, when they do pop up, are gripping. However, they are far and few between, with most of the storyline moving ahead mainly on research and discussions. The potentially most dangerous sequence lasts hardly for a couple of pages. I missed Wendell's bantering with Emily. Granted, the relationship has grown and they aren't in that initial phase anymore, but it would have been nice to see more of those lovely teasing moments between the two. Bookish Nays, the only new entrant to the cast, is a disappointment. There could have been so much more to that character's arc, but it was reduced to a discordant one-noted tune. The plot development is too convenient. Even when there are major confrontation sequences, the challenges pop up only from others' malevolence, not from Emily's actions or decisions. All her issues, no matter how troublesome, are resolved on her very first attempt at tackling them. The final chapter, such a flat and boring ending. Instead of ending on a high, the story ends on a mundane level. The endings of the earlier books were much better. Basically, I had enjoyed the first two books of the Emily Wilde series, and had been looking forward this third book since a long time. The end result is decently good, but not great. I did like it, but overall, I am disappointed at how it didn't live up to the earlier two novels. While the story does reach an end, the ending seems like it has deliberately left the gates open for another outing. If ever it comes, I wouldn't say no to another Emily Wilde book. In fact, I hope there is one more book in this series so that I can enjoy it and say goodbye to Emily and Wendell on a better and happier note. Recommended to those who have read and enjoyed the earlier two novels of this series. 3.25 stars. My thanks to Random House Publishing Group Ballantine for providing the DRC of Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales via NetGalley. This review is voluntary and contains my honest opinion about the book, the Emily Wilde series book 1. Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. Book 2. Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands. This was a buddy read with Shravali. We have journeyed through this series together. But are our feelings the same? Check out her review to find out if she shares my disappointment. Connect with me through my blog, The Story Graph, Instagram, X, Twitter, Facebook. Jasmine, who has 343 likes, says, "Ah, what an amazing ending to the series. Emily and Wendell had even more romance this time around. And every moment was absolutely adorable. All of the things he does for her is so intentional. And dare I say protective. Wendell is the best. We love his duality. Of course I wish they had a teeny bit more adventure time together. But it fits with the plot. At least it meant getting Wendell's letters. His small parts of writing is always my fav in all of the books. 3. I always loved getting faerie lore in their stories. But the way they weaved so well into the plot in this book especially impressed me. I seriously did not know what was gonna happen next. So fitting for twisty fairies. The connections back to their past adventures, old friends showing up, made my heart radiate with happiness. This is one of those series that genuinely made me laugh out loud. And I love it so much. When is the novella coming? Because I need some more fairy fun. Thank you to NetGalley and the publisher for an EARC in exchange for an honest review. I let out a trembling breath. And what sort of queen would that make? Mayhay looked perfectly earnest as he leaned in to kiss my cheek. Mine. Me myself. I who has 35 likes says. Despite never reading it before. As soon as I started this final installment, to my knowledge. Anyway, Fawcett hasn't ever said anything but that it'll be a trilogy. I felt a total sense of cozy nostalgia. I think everyone's aware by now about my excessive love for this series, and I've heard the audiobooks enough that I automatically heard the voices and cadence of the narrators in my head. Even though I was reading this as an EARC, Compendium of Lost Tales picks up where Map of the Otherlands left off, with the characters entering where the trees have eyes. From the beginning, the animal companions have a much larger presence than they've had in prior books. Orga, my love. There's also a much more traditional plot structure and pacing, with very few divergences. On the one hand, I think this might better suit people who found the first book composed of too many vignettes and an unfocused story. On the other hand, I felt a stronger sense of lull between major story beats than in prior books. However, Fawcett never failed to delight me with all of the little world-building details. So from vengeful battle snails to adorable butterfairies, I was always entertained. And I know we all talk about the cozy vibes, the banter, the romance, the academia, and the animal companions in this series, but man, are there also a lot of sword fights. Now that I think about it, this volume definitely did not disappoint on that front. I'd have to say my largest disappointment was the way the story often kept Emily and Wendell apart. Since their playful banter is probably my one favorite thing, there were also fewer instances to see 5 friends from prior novels than I was expecting. And I didn't really feel like new friends were made to fill that gap, but there are several satisfying callbacks and full-circle moments that I adored, including one that made me shout "Aw!" snap aloud in the dark, startling my cats. And though I think I'll continue to reread the first book in the series, the most a not uncommon occurrence for me in series anyway, I'll truly treasure all the joy that this series has brought me and continue to reread it many times in future. Does the dog die? I do not like that Fawcett keeps reminding me how old Shadow is. But he's perfectly fine and completely unharmed. Orga is the cause of some harm to others, but nothing happens to her or Snowbell or any other little cuties. Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands. Thank you so much to Del Rey for the EARC. All thoughts and opinions are my own.